This video was made using insights from vidIQ. Stick around after the video to find out how we used vidIQ as our secret YouTube weapon while making it. When you're invading an enemy nation, the last thing you want to be doing is building extensive defensive fortifications. If, like Russia, your army is forced to do this, then your invasion isn't quite going to plan. But despite erecting the most extensive network of trenches in Europe since World War I, Russia's strategy isn't likely to work. But first, what exactly is Russia doing? And how did it get here? Rocked on its heels by the ferocity of the Ukrainian counterattack at the end of the summer, Russian forces have found themselves in a perilous situation for any would-be invader. If there is one single weapon that Ukraine's counteroffensive hinged on, it was the HIMARS. If there were two, it would be the HIMARS and the High-Speed Anti-Radiation Missile, or HARM. A very close third would be the massive amounts of ammunition, artillery, and shells provided by the West. Before any offensive, there is a phase called shaping operations. During this phase, the attacker uses whatever resources it has available to shape the conflict to come. In World War I, this phase of an offensive would typically entail massive amounts of artillery, with barrages lasting as much as 2 weeks, all in an effort to significantly soften up enemy defenses. In World War II, shaping operations began to take on a more modern definition, involving the use of feints, intelligence deceptions, and covert action behind enemy lines. The goal is typically to mess up enemy plans, make them more difficult to implement, divert enemy forces away from your objective, and neutralize force multipliers, or things like terrain features or weapon systems that significantly increase the lethality of troops on the ground. HIMARS began shaping operations in mid-July with a blistering barrage of strikes against Russian lines of communication, command and control posts, and ammo dumps. The HIMARS mini-offensive caught the Russians completely by surprise, who to date had yet to face any sort of significant precision weapon threat in any conflict. Accustomed to fighting technologically primitive wars in Chechnya and Syria, Russia had learned nothing from the U.S. operations during Desert Storm or subsequent conflicts, and was completely unprepared for the effect of smart weapons in combat. It's possible, however, that Russia didn't plan for these weapons to be in Ukraine. It may have not believed the U.S. would provide them in the first place. Either way, HIMARS was immediately effective on the battlefield and disrupted Russia's offensive and ability to resupply its front lines. It was during the peak of the HIMARS offensive that Russia suffered the greatest losses amongst senior military officers, which had a cascading effect on Russia's ability to coordinate its forces on the ground. Unlike the West, Russia lacks a professional non-commissioned officer corps and still operates with a Soviet-style top-down command structure that discourages individual initiative. With each officer killed, it became harder for Russia to maneuver its forces and adapt quickly to threats, something we would see in full effect during the September counteroffensive in the Northeast. But the destruction of Russian ammunition dumps had a more direct impact on operations. Until HIMARS joined the battlefield, Russian artillery was doing what Russia does best, leveraging an incredible amount of pain and, if very indiscriminate, destruction. However, Russia had foolishly stockpiled its ammunition in a small number of very densely concentrated supply hubs for ease of distribution. This allowed Russia to quickly and efficiently resupply its artillery, which was consuming shells at a voracious rate. But it also left them incredibly vulnerable to long-range precision strikes. The artillery disparity between Russia and Ukraine, at times as high as 20-1, dropped significantly immediately after the strikes, allowing Ukraine to better position its forces for the future offensives. With its ammo stocks now widely dispersed into smaller hubs, Russia has also slowed the pace of its fire missions, relieving significant pressure across the front. The use of HARM missiles by the Ukrainian Air Force allowed it to take out a significant number of air defense units, or rather, all their important radars. This opened up gaps along the front where Ukrainian drones were able to operate again. However, HARM missiles also allowed Ukraine to destroy Russian counter-battery radars, which posed a big threat to Ukraine's own artillery. By tracking the flight path of incoming rounds via radar, Russia was able to deliver accurate counter-battery fire that destroyed any artillery too slow to shoot and scoot. The elimination of these radars allowed Ukraine the opportunity to move less mobile pieces of artillery closer to the front and deliver more punishing fire missions. Thoroughly disrupted, Ukraine's ground offensive caught the Russians completely by surprise and resulted in massive territorial losses and the decimation of some of Russia's best fighting forces, such as the vaunted 1st Guards Tank Army, a unit designed to beat the best that NATO could field. On the heels of overwhelming Ukrainian momentum, greater fighting spirit, and a numbers disparity that began to favor Ukraine as thousands of its conscripts began to join the fighting after months of training, Russia was forced on the defensive, and that's where we find Russia today, launching only limited offensives with barely if any gains to show for them. In response to the expected renewed counteroffensive, Russia has constructed a dense network of defenses, and they're unlikely to work. The Wagner private military company made headlines when it was revealed they'd constructed a dense network of anti-tank obstacles. These go by a variety of names, including Dragon's Teeth and Tiger's Teeth, but serve the same purpose they have for years: slow down an armored offensive. During World War II, they were very effective in slowing but not stopping U.S. armored forces entering Germany. These obstacles are typically buried partly in the ground to make them difficult to move and are built in very dense concentrations. The goal is to funnel forces through gaps in the defensive line, where artillery fire can be concentrated, similar to the use of barbed wire to channel infantry assaults. In the Second World War, they were a significant challenge, but the problem is modern vehicles have evolved greatly since then. There are already videos of Ukrainian vehicles simply driving over them, a very bumpy but manageable ride. If this wasn't bad enough though, when Germany deployed them against the US, they were part of a defense network that ran several hundred miles long with significant defensive depth. Even as undermanned and equipped as the Siegfried Line was when the US pushed into Germany, it still managed to significantly slow the pace of the offensive but not stop it. Russia's modern defenses are much less dense than this and are facing modern forces that can blast paths with high explosives or simply drive directly over these rudimentary defenses. Without significant defensive depth, Russia's slowing of any offensive isn't going to buy enough time to bring overwhelming fire support to bear and destroy an assault force. Further, Russian fire support now has to contend with long-range precision artillery on Ukraine's side, as Ukraine is certain to concentrate its HIMARS and Excalibur precision artillery shells in the locations of these breakthrough assaults. Russian defensive doctrine does dictate the creation of defense in depth, with multiple networks of trenches, typically 3 with 10 kilometers of depth. This is why, as the Ukrainian counteroffensive began, nobody in the West was celebrating it as a success until a breakthrough achieved this magic number. While this isn't a strategically unsound doctrine, Russia's biggest vulnerability is its inability to respond to rapid changes in a combat environment or to bring precision fire down on targets. This is why the United States Brigade combat teams are smaller than the Russian equivalents, the Battalion Tactical Group, as the U.S. favors high mobility and the ability to attack on multiple fronts simultaneously to overwhelm Russian-style top-down command structures. Ukraine, operating with a similar American doctrine, is simply a much more nimble and adaptable force. The presence of Western precision munitions as well as the ever-eroding morale and capabilities of Russia's largely conscript forces is a strong indicator that Russia's defensive strategy is simply going to fail. This is why Russia's new defensive strategy is to try to call for a ceasefire. As the war progresses, both sides are forced to bring more and more conscripts into the fight. However, Ukrainian conscripts have the benefit of months of NATO standard training, often in NATO countries themselves. Russian conscripts instead are being increasingly rushed through a few weeks of training at best and thrown into the fight. The longer the war goes on, the greater the death toll on both sides, but increasingly skewed towards Russia, as its lower and lower quality troops are destroyed by more veteran Ukrainian troops and the ever more capable Western equipment slowly being made available to Ukraine. This is why Russia desperately needs a ceasefire, giving it the breathing room it badly needs to train conscripted troops and build better defenses. And this is why Ukraine should never agree to any ceasefire as long as Russian troops occupy any part of its territory. Ever wondered how we decide what to make videos about? We're going to let you in on a little secret. It's vidIQ. It lets us see exactly how many searches per month a certain keyword gets. More searches means more potential viewers, but of course there's more to it than that. vidIQ also shows you the competition for that keyword. The less competition there is, the more likely that your video will stand out, which means more views for your video. I know it sounds too easy, but it really is. You don't need to have a genius IQ, you need to have vidIQ. But try it for yourself. Get a 30-day trial for only $1 by going to vidiq.com/theinfoshow. Now go check out the huge problem stopping Russia from buying weapons, or click this other video instead.